Hey folks, welcome back to another video. In my opinion, the frequency balance before you go into a limiter or clipper is more important for the loudness or the cleanness of your track than crushing the dynamics too much. So I show you some solutions how you can balance or well balance your track easily with some VSTs and also some experiments I did with Bitwig only solutions. And there's also a preset, of course, in the description that you can download and try it for yourself. And there are also some dangers around this area because you can make your mixdown too bright, which is what a lot of producers do because it sounds louder when you have a lot of energy around 1K. 1K is a pretty important frequency actually for your ears. That's why we have telephone sounding, how they sound. Everything is around 1K. Car horns are around this area, so it's where your ears are basically the most sensible. So yeah, frequencies around this area make your sound, or you make your song sound louder, and it's pretty important to balance your frequencies right. Let's start the video, have some fun, and leave me some comments if you have some questions, of course. Before we start into the video, I have to explain what well-balanced means. So in all my EQs and spectrum analyzers here, I usually tend to use a tilt setting here. In this one, it's called tilt. I think if you use span, for instance, by Voxengo, I have it not installed, of course. You have the Gliss. Yeah, let's use the Gliss EQ here. For instance, in the Gliss EQ, we can do this in the settings. Oh, it's over here. And it's called slope, 4.5 slope, right? And this means if you use a pink noise sound, like this one, you get this more or less straight line. If you bring this here to, let's say, 3, you get a pretty even line. And pink noise is my guide for a well-balanced frequency spectrum in every EQ. So if you don't have an EQ that have the setting, you probably look at a display like, I don't know, like this, where you have 0, of course, where you have this kind of slope, right? So this looks like a well-balanced mixdown in a normal EQ without a slope setting. So I use EQs with a display that can skew the scope or the visuals. I don't scope the sound itself. It's only for the visuals, right? So you can change the slope here with a Gliss EQ, or if you use the span by Voxengo, I think there are the same settings in there. I go for 3, which is pink noise. And I think pink noise is a bit too bright, right? So I go to 4.5 slope, like this. So when I EQ something, I try to make it basically even in a straight line, and I know exactly I'm not too bright and it's still well balanced, right? So this setting I use in the Voxengo Gliss IQ and also here in Bitwig with a tilt setting of 4.5 dB per octave. And this is only, like I said, it's only a visual thing to basically have a guide that you can say, if something is in a straight line here, all my EQs are well balanced for my ears. And this is important to know, that you have the setting active in your EQ or in your visuals to have the same effect, basically. Okay. So we have here a drum loop that is not very well balanced. And it's not important that it's only just a drum loop. You can exchange this for your whole track, your whole song, maybe just a drum bass, maybe a bass bass, maybe just a single sound. It doesn't matter. All these frequency balancing tricks are applied to all kinds of sounds. So let's listen to this one here. So you can see this is not very well balanced. It sounds a bit muffled, and you have a lot of low end energy here, not too much high end. So it's not very well balanced, and you can imagine if you drive this into a limiter, it doesn't sound very well, or it doesn't get better. And that's basically the case if you don't frequency balance your track and then you have mastering limiters or maximizers or compressors on the master bus, and you drive this into them without balancing your frequencies right. You never get a nice, clean sounding, loud mixdown. So the first problem is, of course, that the bass here hits the peak limiter early on. So this one is full range. It's not the multiband limiter. And the lower frequencies are basically hitting the ceiling of the peak limiter earlier than the higher frequencies. And this leads to multiple problems. So for instance, if you use the organ device here, and just imagine this is your track, maybe use here an oscilloscope. Just play a low bass sound. So let's imagine this is your track, and this is your bass sound. And of course, you don't have only bass in your track. You also have upper harmonics, like lead sounds, hi-hats, snares, and so on. And all these sounds, these upper frequency sounds, are forced to be on this carrier wave on your bass sound, right? This is what your speaker cone needs to reproduce. You have a lot of different sounds and different frequencies above your bass, and all these frequencies need to be on this carrier wave, which is your bass. And now imagine your bass sound, your fundamental frequency, hits earlier the limiter than all the other frequencies, which means you get distortion on this wave here. Looks like this. So instead of a nice sine wave, you get the saw wave. And all the upper harmonics need to be on this new saw wave. So they distort even more. And this is a problem. So you need to balance this out. You need to hit your full range limiter basically with all your frequencies at the same time. Kind of. Not really, but you know, a nice balance is better than having a lot of subs going into the limiter and affecting all the other frequencies too. So this is maybe nice to know how this works, to imagine this in your head, basically. So we need to balance out here the drums. And of course, we can just use here the EQ and, you know, fill in the holes. Maybe say we want to remove here this mountain. We want to push up here at the end to balance this a bit better before we go into our mastering limiter. And this is how I did it basically in all of my earlier production years. You use an EQ and you go for the holes, go for the peaks, and then try to limit everything out until you have a nice, clean, balanced mixdown, or maybe so it sounds right to your ears, or you use, like I do here, 4.5 dB octave slope, which is kind of a pink noise curve, so everything that's straight on this EQ is well balanced, kind of. It's a rough guide, but it works most of the times. And then you hit your limiter with this balanced EQ, right? So it sounds a bit brighter now. It doesn't distort that fast. You hit with all the frequencies, the ceiling of the peak limiter at the same time. And it sounds much louder than this. You can see we don't even limit that anymore because we basically get this peak here out of the way from the bass. You can see we hit here more of the ceiling or more of the limiter because we have a lot of low end. And it sounds even louder because we're pushing here 1K a bit more So it sounds cleaner, it sounds louder, and this is what I want to say basically. If you have a bright mix, or if your mix down is brighter, then it sounds also louder. So you don't need to limit everything. So the frequency balance is, in my opinion, more important for the loudness than reducing the dynamics. Okay, so now that we have here this very nice looking EQ curve, we can also do this automatically with some plugins or with some Bitwig internals. And I want to show you some tricks how you can do this without VST plugins. But first I'll show you the VST way. So instead of using this here, so I disable this, you can use, for instance, OZONE 8, which you get pretty cheap. You don't need the expensive thing. I'm not sure if it's available in the essential package, or if you need to upgrade at least to the mid package. I don't know how it's called, but there is a matching EQ in this one here. So what you do is you go to the matching mode, and then you can analyze your source material, right? You click on capture, play your track, and then you analyze basically your frequency curve. And you can do this forever or how long you want. And when you're done, you press just stop. And then this EQ basically remembers this curve. And then you can switch here to a pink noise guide, right? You can see now here this red line. And if you activate here this on button, you activate now an curve, an EQ curve that tries to EQ your analyzed material to match this red target curve. And you can influence this here by the amount. And most of the times I go for 10 or 15% is completely enough, because I do this sometimes multiple times on multiple buses, even on the master bus. So I sometimes do this on the drums bus, then on the drum and bass bus, and then on the master bus again. And if you do this multiple times, then at every stage you notch your mix into a more linear or pink noise led kind of frequency balance. There's obviously also settings that are too bright. So this is also important. Don't overdo this. There are a lot of old school producers on Twitter and YouTube, and they're already complaining about that most of today's mixdowns are too bright. Because it sounds louder, right? People want to sound loud as possible, or it should be the loudest mix on the radio. So they go, of course, for brighter mixdowns. Maybe it's also because we have a lot of smartphones and headphones users who use or listen to music on these kind of devices. So maybe it's because of that. But I think it's mostly because of the loudness one. You want to have the loudest possible mixdown ever. So you have to be aware of this. There is a sweet spot, of course, for everything, and you can overdo also here with the brightness. So don't be aware of that. It can be nice to have an, not so bright mixdown. Maybe it's not that loud, but you gain a bit of warmth and roundness to your mixdown, which sound better sometimes than just go for the super high-end loudness, brightness, razor sharp mixdown. And of course, it also depends of course on the style, on the genre you're doing. So OZONE 8 here is something I use heavily because it's easy to do. It doesn't draw a lot of CPU power like Gullforce or all the other spectral analysis tools. It's super easy on the CPU because you analyze one time and then you apply a simple EQ curve and that's it basically. And you can redo this anytime you want to. And recently I don't go for pink noise anymore. I go for the 60B guide here instead of pink noise. And you can see the 60B guide here is a bit more gentle on the high end. So I'm not in the, so I'm basically not in the danger of overdoing my brightness, basically. So I go for 6 dB, and it doesn't push the high end here, not that much like on the 6 as versus the pink noise curve here. Okay, so that's an easy, nice trick here with the Ozone 8. Another thing you can do if you don't want to use Ozone 8 and you want a quick solution maybe for drums, is I use inside Bitwig Studio, there's this container here, FX3, where you can split up your frequencies into multiple bands. And I think you can also do this with kilohertz, these snap-ins modules. I think there are also containers where you can split up your frequency into multiple bands. And then you can put into these ranges or into these bands here some limiters. And then drive up basically until you hit the ceiling. So we have here exactly... So it's not about limiting, it's more like of balancing the loudness or the peaks. So mid. High end. Something like this. And then at the end here, you can see we go into the limiter much more because we pushed each of these frequency bands here. So you can see we go heavily here into the peak limiter, so maybe you have to reduce the volume a bit. So now it sounds much brighter because we balanced here basically the frequency spectrum with these three bands. But all we did is basically pushing up the volume here of each band until we hit the ceiling of the peak limiter without limiting too much. It's more about balance and loudness of each band. And of course it's only 3 bands, so it's not super precise. But if you kind of want something quick for drum bass, for instance, then this is something I do most of the times because it's easy to do, and yeah, it doesn't involve around, or it doesn't need to have VSTs involved. And you can also here use a hard clip for drums, which is nice. So you clip the drums here a bit, you can drive this even more. And if we go here to a spectrum analyzer, freeze this here. We don't get these nuances or these resonances out here, but you can see it's a super yeah, linear or even frequency distribution, which is what we want. Like I said, it's only 3 bands, so you don't get the, you know, these minor peaks in and out here. You have to use an EQ for that. But for the overall general spectral balance, this is nice to do on drums sometimes. So I did this trick, or I pushed this trick sometimes even further. And I show you this also here in a minute. Instead of using 3 bands, I thought, maybe we can use some filters and use multiple or more of these frequency bands here. And I did this here with the balancer preset. Let me see, BANDPASS. So I used some multiple methods. It was more like an experiment, right? So I used your BANDPASS filters. I load this up. Takes a minute. Maybe remove this clip here. So we have here basically a chain device with multiple BANDPASS filters in parallel. You can see every layer is basically a different frequency band. right? So up until the, so we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 bands. And each band has a filter, of course, and this reference level tool here, which I built at some point. And this reference level preset is also part of, let me see, the Bitwig official packages here called Audio FX Spacetime and Color. So if you have this one installed, you get this reference level tool, which is basically just a normalizer, a live normalizer, or if you want to, a pretty super slow compressor, if you want to see it that way. And I can show you in a minute what it does. So let's disable everything here. And we have this drum loop here with this loudness. And if I pull the loudness down, it becomes quieter, of course. Makes sense, right? And if I do this, increase the volume here, it gets too loud. So pretty normal, right? But if you put my reference level tool on that, this one analyzes basically your input signal and pushes the loudness or the volume of your audio track to that level that you set up here. So if I let this run and make this quieter and louder, you can hear that nothing changes at all. So the reference level tool basically brings the volume from your audio material up to a reference level, and the reference level you can just set up here with this knob. So it's basically my attempt of creating some kind of normalizer, live normalizer in Bitwig. This also has a threshold, so every audio material that's below this threshold doesn't get analyzed. Also, if you have quiet parts in here, they don't get pushed up, so you need to be above a certain threshold. And there's also a patch in there that prevents from having transients pushing through the mixdown. So if you have abruptly changes in your audio material, the volume gets pushed down immediately, so you don't get these artifacts, these transient artifacts. So this is a short excursus here to my reference level tool. So I use this reference level tool now on every band here, right? So I try to bring every band to the same loudness, to the same reference peak loudness or volume. And yeah, this is how it sounds. Takes a while until it analyzes everything and then brings in the frequency balance. So let's see here. So you can see we have now here also a nice, better, evenly balanced mixdown just using multiple bandpass filters here and the reference volume tool on each of these bands. If you don't want to use my reference tool here, you can put on, of course, a limiter and push every band by hand up until you reach the ceiling. Or you can use, of course, clippers here on each of these bands, but I would say just use some peak limiters. It works also well. So maybe use here a spectrum again. white and also freeze and disable my balanced balancer here. So this is how it looks like before, right? And this is how it looks like afterwards. So it balances out your frequencies evenly without using any VST plugins at all. It's just, you know, filters and my reference tool here from the grid. Or if you don't want to use that, then you can use just the peak limiter and do it manually. Also possible. Maybe there's also here, let me see. Maybe I have here different approach to that. Next layer. This is one with compressors here, where I try to reproduce OTT, but because you have upwards compression here. This is also split here with an EQ, also with reference level. So instead of using a filter, bandpass filter, I'm using EQ2s here, separating the bands. Just trying out what sounds better. This one, let me see, takes a while to load. There's more bands probably, no? This is also with 3 bands here only, and the reference level works also. And then there's one here with a VST called Peel. So instead of using bandpass filters, I'm using this VST plugin, which is a spectral tool, and it looks like this here. Or maybe go to the upper frequencies here. Right, you can use here basically this small little rectangle to bandpass certain frequencies, but on a spectral basis. And spectral is basically that you get razor sharp bandpass filters. Let me see a spectrum. You can see you can go pretty steep here with the frequency curve. It's almost like too clinical, right? And this is also how it sounds, as you can hear it. And here on these bands, I'm using also reference level. Maybe I use more gain here. So we can get past this threshold level here on the upper frequencies. But if we watch this here on a spectrum, it's super even, right? But you can hear these artifacts from the spectral FFT conversion, or the splitting of the frequency with these harsh EQ curves. But you get this pretty even, right? So before I close down this video, I want to show you how I implement this here on a track. I made this recently on stream, I think. And yeah, we have here a track. There's nothing on the master, right? There's nothing on this group here. Then we have a drum and bass group. There's nothing on there. Inside we have drums and the bass, of course. Inside the drum bass group, there's drums and bass. On the bass is also nothing. And on the drums, there's only a transient control here pushing the sustain. On the drums itself, there's only a clipper on the drums here a bit. So nothing special, right? So, and I want to show you how this sounds here. So I just recorded this here so we can listen to it after we did some changes. We call this alt mixdown here. And let's add something to it, right? So let's say we're starting here with drums. So we can see it goes straight here above the red 0 line, 5 dB. So what we can do is we can implement here what I told you before. We use my FX3 trick, pushing this here to the ceiling. Yes, maybe a bit too much. We can even dial this back here. So nice. And then we go straight here into a clipper. And because we are over 0 dB with 8.6 dB, we probably cut here everything above with the clipper. And you can test how much we can drive this. You can hear the bass drum is distorting, so it's not pleasant. Let's say this is still okay, 2 dB. Maybe go to 1 dB. Okay, done. So we go to the bass here. The bass is, let's see, peak limiter. Maybe push this up here to the ceiling, so we just barely scratch the surface here. We still want to have these peaks in there because I like these hits, right? Don't want to push it, you know, all the way this and make some kind of worst brick wall out of it. It's nice to do sometimes, but you miss all these nice impacts from the bass. It's still compressed heavily here, but okay, now we have this. We can remove here the volume by minus 3 dB. Maybe we can cut here a bit from the low end from the kick drums. Maybe not too much because I like the bass drum. But this is okay. So now that we have this, we can go to the drum and bass bus here where we mix the drums and the bass together. You can see it, we still surpassing here 0 dB by 4 dB. So we can use maybe the OZONE 8 here. You can see if we can balance this out a bit more or a bit better. So we go to matching, capture the input. Okay, 6 dB. You can see here we remove a lot of bass here still and push up the high end. And you can decide if you want to step into the bass here, maybe go by -4 and then analyze it again. So we have balanced this now here, and we are still going over 0 dB. So we can use again a hard clip here, with no input gain. We just want to clip everything above 0. And again, we can test this. This is way too much, but I just want to show you that you can drive this even further if you want to. You can go +4. But now it starts to distort. Or at least I can hear it on the bass drum. I mean, you could go in here and maybe cut the low end from the bass, from the kick drum even more, so you have more room. But this is okay. So now that we have this here, we can maybe go to the music and see what's going on here. You can also use the Ozone 8 here. Wants to push here the bass. Can we remove this? So this makes no sense here, right? You can just remove this here. Put an EQ plus on there. There's nothing below 100 Hertz, which is nice, so we really don't need to cut everything there, but okay, put the limiter on here. So this would be okay. This is okay. Okay, so we have this, and then we mix basically the music and drum and bass together into all, which is in my case here the master bus. We can do the same here with the Ozone 8 again and see how this sounds. We are above here 0 dB, and now you can decide if you want to use a limiter for that. You know, have it like this, a bit smooth, or you go with the hard clip, because most of the peaking frequencies or peaks are drums. Right, you can see this. Yeah, this is not bass on. This is basically just drum and bass, or just the kick drums and the snares. So now that we have this, we can check here the dB meter. You can see we have -4.3 LUFS just with bass, kick, and some pad sounds here. So this video was more a deep dive into the frequency balance topic I already touched in my initial tutorial about mixing and mastering. And I don't claim to be having the one and only solution for that. It's just my approach to these kind of things, and it's more aimed at dance floor productions. I also do, of course, ambient a lot on my channel, but with these type of songs or projects, I like to don't do that much in terms of limiting and compressing and so on. It's just a touch of EQing some frequencies away, but most of the times I try to leave the sounds alone, because I like to have all these small little details, texture, peaks, and, you know, stuff like this in there. So there's not much going on in terms of mastering and mixing, you know, just dialing in the loudness as I like it or as I think it sounds right, and that's basically it. So I really enjoy having this freed up of all this stuff I showed you in this video. But for dance floor production, of course, you need punchy drums, you need punchy bass lines, you need it loud and clean and bright. So these tips are basically more aimed at this kind of genre of music. So I also plan to do, of course, more videos in the mastering mixing section or area. Also going more into detail at certain topics I already touched in my initial tutorial, and yeah, they come over the next weeks, I think. So thanks for watching. Please leave a like if you like the video, subscribe to the channel, don't forget it. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.